Hello, everybody. Hi, hello. Welcome to, I guess this is episode 72A of Office Hours, live from PAX. I'm not going to make you get all excited and woo, but it's Monday. There you go, all right. A little half-hearted, that's nice. Just relax. So, so we're doing a live Office Hours here at PAX West. I've done Office Hours live once before, and it was a blast, and I'm super happy we got a chance to do it again. So thank you for coming. For folks who may not be familiar, I'm Adam Coble. Hello. I'm the GM in residence for Roll20.net, and you might know me as the GM of lots of things like Swan Song or Far Verona or Court of Swords, many of the role-play shows. We just finished up Tomb of Annihilation for D&D. I do a lot of dungeon mastering, and I have been doing it since I was 10 years old, and I'm 34 now, so you do the math, because I'm not going to. So normally, this would be an hour-long sort of Tuesday morning affair where I would answer 3 questions pre-arranged from my audience live on Twitch, twitch.tv/Adam Coble. But today, since it's live and I have you lovely people here, I'm going to let you ask me questions about tabletop role-playing games. Nominally, this is a Game Master advice show, but if you have player questions, if you have game design questions, things you think that I can help you with, please percolate on them now. Before we get into it, before I make you all line up and we abandon our chairs for the sake of the microphone, I just want to talk a little bit about why we do Office Hours, like why it's a show, why we've been doing it as long as we have, and kind of what the impetus for it is for me. So most GM, DM, storyteller, hollyhock god, whatever you call your person in that role, advice is garbage. Like just straight up trash. To the point where I've read books that are so afraid to give GM advice that they're like, you could use this rule, or don't. I don't know, please don't be mad at me. So for me, a lot of that sort of wishy-washy, terrible GM advice leads to people not knowing what to do in specific circumstances at the table when they're playing with their friends and something comes up and they're like, I don't know how to handle this. And they look at these books or they look at these editorial blogs on the internet and they're just kind of like, you could maybe think about doing it this way, but you know, you're the GM. You have ultimate authority. Why are we giving you advice? And it's like, because we need it. So after some conversations with some friends of mine, mostly Judd Carlson, who's been running a Burning Wheel themed like advice blog since forever, and John Harper, who's the creator of Blades in the Dark, I kind of came to the realization that we needed something that was specific. I needed an opportunity to address very specific questions, not just in a general sense, this bad thing might happen, but like, yo, yesterday at my session, everything came apart because this character was being like this person was like this, the system failed us, and what the hell do I do? Which leads to situations where sometimes the advice that I give, it will help exactly one person. And that's why I do it every week, and we do 3 questions, and someday, eventually, everyone's problems will be solved. Or I'll die. Probably that one. So there are a lot of people getting into role-playing games now. Obviously, the hobby is sort of retaking off. We've come out of the 90s slump, and we're swiftly returning to the period of popularity that we saw in the 80s. People who are new to Dungeons & Dragons, you may not know, but like, it was a very big deal. There was a breakfast cereal. There were cartoons. They were going to open a theme park. It was a whole thing. And so we're returning to this age of D&D being like a really big deal, but now we're not watching it syndicated on Saturday morning TV. We're watching other people play it, and we are being given access to it in a way that we never have before. But there's a lot of different influences on people. There is still this feeling that like we don't totally know how to make every game work at the table. There's still problems that come up. And I think that's cool because it means I still have a job and we can still do things like this. If everybody was already perfect, you wouldn't need me. So the 2 things that sort of supersede every question I have ever answered on Office Hours ever is 2 pieces of advice that will apply to everybody, no matter what, player, GM, whatever. The first is that you talk to your players. And I know this sounds crazy because that's what a role-playing game is. You're literally talking to each other. Go figure. But when I say talk to your players, I mean as players, as other humans, as people you are ostensibly like at least friendly enough with. Like if you're playing with people who are not your friends and you don't feel comfortable having a conversation with them, I don't know what your group is like. I hope you're not playing D&D with your enemies. That seems weird to me. You know what, do you? But talking to people as if they were people first and then characters and players in your game second is really important. And this means sitting down before you start your campaign and establishing kind of what you're interested in, what you all want to do together, what everybody wants to experience at the table, what they don't want to experience at the table. Usually this involves a little bit of world building, depending on the game. It can involve character creation. I think it's a huge deal to have a session 0 where you sit down, you all make characters together. I have a hard time coming to the table and saying, okay, everyone already has their characters. Now I have to make a game. It gives you as a GM the opportunity to kind of just take notes. Be like, okay, you two are going to hate each other. That's great. I'm going to make an NPC for you to fight over. And you're just there to listen, really, as the GM. So talking to your players is a thing you do before the game, and it's a thing you do throughout your whole campaign, and you encourage the players to talk to each other, right? Good communication. This is why most of Office Hours advice feels like relationship advice, because it is. And that's okay. So establishing that kind of communicative relationship with your players will help you get over most of the social bumps in the road that come up. We have this weird thing that happens where it's assumed that the GM is responsible for certain social things, like making sure everyone has fun, which is like, fuck that. Like, that's not my job. It's not your job either. It's the GM's job to make sure that they are doing their job. They're fulfilling the rules, results of their role in the game, and being a good player, but that's everyone's job, right? And there's all these things, right? Like the GM is responsible for things on this awkward, subtle level that I think never really gets brought up. So just talk about it. Be like, so what do you need to have a good time? What do I need? Let's talk about things that are important to us. Is there anything in the game that people are worried about coming up? Any triggering content that we don't want to deal with? Let's just have that conversation and then check in as you go. And that will iron out most of the problems that you'll have at the social level. Mechanically, game-wise, the other big piece of advice is make sure you're playing the right game. And I think this piece of advice is getting more and more significant the more people get into role-playing games who don't know that there are other games besides Dungeons and Dragons. Like, D&D is super cool, but if you want to play a game about basically anything that isn't getting swords and going into a dungeon and murdering things for gold, you need a different game. And I think that this is a place where I run into a lot of friction with other people on the internet because the prevailing narrative is you can do anything with a role-playing game. Dungeons and Dragons, you can tell any kind of story you want. That's a lie. That's straight up, it is a lie. Just in the same way that I would not suggest that you try to do like a slice of life anime using Burning Wheel. Don't try to do like sci-fi with Dungeons and Dragons. There are thousands of excellent role-playing games out there. And developing as a player, as a GM, developing an understanding of what makes a game work, what games are about, knowing how to bypass when game developers lie to you about what their game is about and reading their mechanics for what the game is about is a massively important skill and something that you pick up by playing and reading a bunch of different games and getting to understand them. So picking the right game for your group, as a group, sitting down and saying, okay, what are we all interested in at a role-playing level, right? And when people are saying like, I want high fantasy adventure, I want to throw fireballs, I want a grid with miniatures on it, you can be like, excellent. I know a few games that might fit that. And if they say, I want deep characterization, I want a post-apocalyptic setting, I want to be a robot, like having that to bring forward is a really great thing. The bigger your toolkit, the more likely you are to be able to pair your group up with the right game. And that all includes part of that session 0, like choosing the game. Now, it isn't to say that you can't put forth a game to begin with. You can't say, I would like to GM a game of Torchbearer. And then people will be like, what's that? And then it's on you to pitch it. And they might like it, they might not. But that can be a thing you can do. It doesn't mean you all have to decide by committee. But just be able to have that conversation and to know what games are out there. And I think the best way to do that now is watch other people playing them. Like, you can read a book, and you can kind of internalize what the rules say, but you can't get a feel for what the game looks like at the table until either you play it yourself or more likely you watch somebody else play it. So chances are pretty good at this point you can find someone doing a podcast or a one-shot of just about any role-playing game that you might be interested in, which is super cool. So play the right game, talk to your players, And then everything else is just going to be more specific. So let's do the thing. Let's answer some questions. There's a microphone over there. So there you go. You did it. You did exactly the thing you needed to do. So go ahead and line up. We've got lots of time. So if you don't feel like standing at the mic, that's cool. Hang out. If you think of a question, pop up there. I'm going to try to take some time. Don't run away as soon as you ask your question because I might have follow-ups. Rock and roll. Yes.
Or in this case, you bring games to the table that you really want to play as a GM because none of your friends like the big book of rules.
Okay.
But only some of your group is interested in playing that game. I know we have resources like Roll20, which are great for finding groups. What are some other ways that you can go about finding players for the type of game that you want to run?
Right. So the question was, if you have a game that you want to run and you have some people who want to play it, but not enough to fill a group, what can you do? Am I hearing you right? So yeah, I mean, it really depends on the venue in which you're playing, right? Like, I think there is some wiggle room to like convince people to play, because again, you may pitch a game and people might be like, that doesn't sound great, but when you actually play it, it might be fun. I think one-shots are great for this. So if you have a game that you really want your group to play, don't ask them like, we're gonna play for a 10-session campaign. Just be like, all right, next session, I would like to run a 5-hour one-shot of this game, and hopefully your friends will be like, yeah, that sounds fun. I'm willing to experiment, but respect their boundaries. If they say like, no, I just don't like what this game is about, I'm not interested, that's okay. Then you can go, looking for other groups. If you're playing in person, being plugged into your kind of local tabletop community can be really like empowering and nice. Because I guarantee that you're having the same problem that other people are, right? Someone out there is like, man, why can't I find a GM to run this obscure game that I want to play? And my group wants to play this other game. So they're out there, but it's harder in person to connect. Usually the hubs for this stuff are your hopefully friendly local game store. Any kind of organized play space is useful for that. But again, it really depends on where you live. Some places have a more vibrant tabletop community than others. So you can always turn to the internet. Being plugged into broader communities, I know that there's like an LFG community on like Reddit. There's the Roll20 forums. I have found that it's almost better to be plugged into a group of like-minded people that may not be exclusively tabletop oriented. So if you're already part of an online community of people that you like and are cool for a different reason, usually if you'll go in and you're like, hey, does anybody want to play a role-playing game? They'll be like e-hands just like popping up all over the place. So you can extend that out to real life too, right? Like, if you know the kind of game that you want to play and the sort of fiction that it's like and the kinds of things that are adjacent to it, if you know people who are maybe not tabletop RPG players but who like that stuff, you can be like, so you really like Hannibal? Well, I have this role-playing game about dismembering and eating people that you might also be into. It's super gay. You'll love it. So that's the thing, right? Is that like, I think there's a space for evangelizing there, where you can turn people into tabletop role-playing gamers. And often I find that to be almost more successful because that way you don't have anyone coming to the table with preconceptions. They're like, I don't even know what a role-playing game is. And you're like, can you make things up? And they're like, yes. And then there you go. You're done. That's it. That's role-playing. So knowing your audience, right? Knowing the kind of thing, getting a group that's willing to experiment and try to see if they're actually, because people a lot of the time will be like, nah, new thing. I'm not into it. So ask them for an opportunity to show off this game. Hear them if they say like, okay, that was fun, but I never want to play that again and I hate you. Hopefully they won't say that. And then, yeah, look outside that into the sort of broader community. And I think it doesn't hurt, even if you're not actively like going out there looking for people to play with, it doesn't hurt just to be plugged into a group of people who are hype about the same stuff as you. Like, that feels good, right? Yeah.
Right, thank you.
Cool. Yeah, you're welcome. Hello.
So I just ended a...
We're replacing the microphone. It's being swapped. Yeah, I will repeat your question anyway, so it's cool.
So I just ended a long-running campaign.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I was gonna say, was it on purpose? Okay, no, it was not. All right, well then I'm sorry.
One of the main issues I had during my campaign is I had very little trouble getting the players to roleplay with me. But getting them to roleplay with each other was very difficult when they didn't want to be a character, they wanted to talk.
So you want to encourage your players to like embody their characters more, like talk in character and engage, like do the funny voice and not just be like,
I just don't want to feel like I'm playing with 6 different people and not a table of people that are all playing.
oh, so like one-on-one, when you and Throndir are having a conversation, you get the elf voice, but then Throndir turns back into Gary when he's talking to the table. Yeah, I mean, like the game, first of all, the game should encourage that kind of thing. Like if you're playing a game that doesn't encourage like role playing in the group, then all of the work is going to be on you and your players, which is okay. You can have that conversation. You can be like, guys, I love it. I love getting the Throndir voice. Give me the elf voice. But it's cool for me to see you interact with each other in that way. I think a lot of the time we get this divide. D&D is especially egregious for this, but any game where there's like a tactical element where the players become... I don't want to go too deep into the theory of this, but there's... I've talked about this on a previous episode. There's this idea in some game theory about stances. So like the stance being the way that we see our character. So if we are doing the elf voice and using our milords and miladies and our what have yous, that's in like actor stance. So you're like in the head of your character, you are portraying your character, you're thinking, what would my character do and how are they motivated in this moment? But often what'll happen when you bring out the hex grid or you bring out the map and you say, okay, we're gonna start taking turns, people will take a step back into pawn stance. And pawn stance is when you look at your character as a piece on a board and you're making optimal decisions about your character's placement. And so watching the characters watching the players shift their attention from their character to that back and forth, it can be a little bit jarring if it happens quickly, right? You don't want to have that Final Fantasy effect where it's like, here's one game, and then all of a sudden, since we rolled initiative, it's this totally other game, and the Throndir voice has evaporated. So I think, again, like, the first 2 pieces of advice apply. Like, look at the ways that your game is encouraging it, right? And if it's not at all, you can change the game. You can hack stuff in. You can reward your players for in-character stuff. So if you're playing 5th edition D&D, which I'll use as the kind of baseline for this. Fuck it, what game are you playing? There you go, okay. So it's 5th edition D&D. I don't want to assume, but so in 5th edition, the only thing we get to reward players for role-playing is inspiration, right? It's dumb. It's totally stupid. But you can change it to reward specific stuff. Because right now, it's whenever thou pleasest the dungeon master, inspiration, right? But instead, you can codify it. You can say, like, whenever we learn something about your character through a conversation you have with another player, inspiration, right? Now they have a mechanical reason to have those little, like, fireside chats. And you get to sit back and take notes and be like, oh, that's cool. I didn't know that about that character. Because that, I think, is the value in watching 2 players interact in character, is that you don't have to be thinking like, okay, which accent does this NPC have? How do I do this thing? Like, you're in the moment. You get to step back and then furiously scribble notes that you can then use later to destroy them. But encourage them mechanically, like give them a reason. Think about how you can play with inspiration to do that. I would stay away from modifying experience to do that because I don't think the game works really well if you make RP and XP like intricately tied. So changing the reward structure of the game will 100% change the behavior of the players. And then the other thing you can do is just like tell your players that you as a person value watching them do that thing. You're like, it's really fun and cool for me, and it will make this more fun for me, and I will do a better job as a DM if I get to watch you do this stuff. So hopefully telling them what you want and need will like resonate, and they'll hear you, and they'll internalize that, and they'll do it more. But if your needs are not enough, you can reward them with bullshit mechanical stuff, and hopefully they'll do it then.
All right, cool, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Do you have guidance for staying in character when playing NPCs, keeping track of what NPCs want, just being consistent?
I do have advice for that. So I tend to play games like Stars Without Number or Burning Wheel that allow the players to create NPCs. And so sometimes, like in the Roll20 Burning Wheel game, just NPC build up, right? Like there were so many characters and they all wanted different stuff. But what I will do for basically any game that I'm playing is I'll sit down at the beginning of the session and make a list of all of the NPCs that I think are currently like relevant on the small scale, like today's episode. In the next 4 hours, what NPCs am I going to be thinking about? And I'll make a note about what they want, because that's really all an NPC. That's all you need, really, is like, what is the one thing this person wants? And you don't even have to be complicated about it. It doesn't have to be like, to get the scepter of Glorthon so that he can open the gates of doom and let forth the white dragon. And like, fuck all that. He just wants power, right? Like it's power or violence or power violence. He wants to learn how to play the guitar. So like that's the thing, is like, for me, one line sentences about each NPC, whether it's a player created one, whether it's one I created, and usually the things that they want will run in direct opposition to a thing a player wants. Like if a player wants to live, maybe you have an NPC that wants to murder them. See, it's easy. This I think is important because for characterization, really, like, desire is the most important thing, because everything else kind of flows out of that. What a character wants is either thwarted or given to them or complicated by the narrative. And so if you know what they want, you can just in any moment be like, how are they going to get that? How are they going to get that? How are they going to get that? Right? You think about their desire, and then you can look at their stats and their spells and their abilities and say, okay, these are the tools they have to get the thing that they want. And so they're going to be effective or not effective in that case. And then for all the ephemera and stuff, like the voice and the effect, I stick to remembering 3 things about any given character. Maybe it's the way they dress, it's an accent, maybe it's something sort of looser or broader. It might just be like a word, right? It might be like autumn, right? That might be a thing that, like, for me, helps cement that character, but don't do more than 3, because you won't be able to remember. The players will not care about any more than 3 things about an NPC. I think that we worry about making characters not complex enough, but you can really rein it back and just be like, this character only matters so much as it affects the players. And I think all of that advice is useful if you're a player, too. Like, you don't need to know more than 3 important things about your character, and every time you sit down during the session, you're like, all right, what do I want today? And you can see that on the player side. You can see that built into a lot of games mechanics, right? Like goals in Mouse Guard or Torchbearer, beliefs in Burning Wheel, goals in Stars Without Number. All of that stuff is just encouraging you as a player to be like, what do I want? How am I going to get that today? Experience points. So yeah, keep it simple, focus on what they want, think about 3 important things, and then if you want to make like broader notes, like I have the advantage of if I forget a character's accent, I can go back and listen to myself butcher it, but you know, make a note when you first start playing the character, be like, sounds German, ? I tried. Yeah, cool. There you go. Thanks. Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, so I have a high-level wizard in my campaign currently, and I'm running...
Are you this high-level wizard, or you're one of your players is a high-level?
One of my players.
Okay, all right.
And
so they have a wizard.
Yeah, and, very smart player, and I'm running into an issue where a lot of the time, a lot of the work that I'm doing to build the campaign gets magicked away in a couple of the spells, in combinations I didn't think of, and in ways that I just didn't anticipate. And I've tried throwing a lot of enemies, lower level stuff. I've also tried, artificially limiting power, but both of those are getting kind of old. Yeah. What is your advice for dealing with, frankly, a player that's smarter than me and can figure out stuff that I didn't anticipate?
So this is a thing that happens in like comic books a lot, right? This is the Superman conundrum where it's like you can't go after Superman directly. So figure out the things that this player's character wants. Figure out ways that are not intrinsic to them that they're vulnerable, and like go after that stuff, right? Endanger the things that are weak that they can't protect, and give them lots of things to juggle, right? Like if you're super powerful, you are an important factor in the campaign world, and there's going to be lots of people who want things from you, who rely on you for stuff. Like this is the trick about high-level D&D, is that once you get to level 20, if you're still like a solitary murder hobo, you can pretty much do whatever you want, and the world is just going to like crumble around you, in which case, go ahead and play out that power fantasy, and then be like, the campaign is done. We're going to start over at level 1. Like you got to do whatever it is you needed to do, and that's cool. We can put an end to it. There is an end to that arc, right? Like even for this player, being super smart and universally powerful will get tiring eventually, and it might already be, right? And then again, the other thing you can do is just like talk to your player. Like the thing you just told me, tell them. Be like, all right, I get it. You're super smart and your character's awesome and that's fun for you. Can we move past the power fantasy stuff into like, what would be interesting? What's an interesting way for me to challenge your character? Like, where do you think it would be fun to explore, right? So your character, this wizard, may be, AC 400 and have 1 billion hit points and have wish spells and all this stuff, but they may have like deep-seated emotional trauma that would be interesting to explore, right? So this is the thing, right, is knowing the player and understanding kind of what their priorities are, and then asking them kind of like what would be fun for you. I think a lot of advice you're going to get is like, like anti-magic fields and like make up a monster that's invincible to all of their best shit. But that just feels so like mean and dumb, right? You're like, oh, cool, I like your custom monster that is explicitly designed to fuck me over. I get it, that's fun. I can't use any of my good shit anymore. Right? You don't want to neutralize the character, but also I get that frustration where you're like, cool, all of these monsters have a +4 to hit and your AC is 25, and like, what's the point of doing this anymore? So, like, talking to the player and just being like, okay, cool, like, the game doesn't really care about what your character wants outside of experience points and treasure, but like I do. I'm interested in the characterization, so talk about that. And be ready to be like, cool, all right, maybe the story of, Glorthon the Invincible is done. Maybe we're done with that. Maybe you won. Good job. You're a god now. Would you like to like write the portfolio for this god in the next campaign we do? Right? You can retire the character in a way that feels like cool. Let things end.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome.
All right. So this kind of comes. Oh, I'm a little close. This kind of comes back to what you were mentioning earlier about how RPG systems are specialized, and for any kind of task that you're seeking to do in a game, there's probably a system out there to do it. Mm-hmm. And with that, past week or so, I picked up the Cypher system rulebook. Mm-hmm. And I was curious what your thoughts were on that, considering it's more general in purpose.
Yeah. So there was a question about this a few episodes ago about like generic rule sets, because there are a few, right? There's Fate, there's GURPS, there's Cypher. The Age system is basically like a generic rule set that gets reskinned for a bunch of stuff. I don't personally like them very much myself, because I want a game that has something to say. I want a game that says like, this game is about these specific narratives. I don't want just a conflict or task resolution system, or like how likely is it that I will succeed. That's what the game has to say. But I also think that a lot of games that are generic or pretend to be aren't. Like Fate, I don't think is as generic as it claims to be. I think it's really good at a couple of types of fiction because of the mechanisms, but it's only really, like, you can only really do pulp with Fate, because bad stuff doesn't really happen to the characters. And so I think if you're getting interested in a more generic seeming system, reading the rules and watching people play it and playing it yourself, you're going to learn what it does well and what it doesn't do well. And if the thing it does well is just resolve the question of, do I do the thing or do I not do the thing, then it's going to rely on you and your players to do a bunch of non-mechanical work to fill in what John Harper refers to as the poetry layer, right? Like, nothing about a generic system is going to be evocative of setting or style unless the game has mechanics for it. And generic ones just ask you to do a bunch more of that work. So I think if you're interested in a game that is only there to mediate success or failure, generic systems can be super useful. But if you're looking for a game that will force, gently, hopefully, the players to behave a certain way, then looking for a game that more specifically does the thing that you want is a better call.
And then I also have a kind of follow-up
Yeah,
question before I go back to the back.
No, it's cool. We got time.
On the other side of the spectrum, then, games like D&D, Warhammer, Pathfinder, the list goes on. A lot of the setting material, spells, classes have a lot of the setting information baked into them. What is typically your approach for either divorcing the setting from the rules or working around it?
I love implied setting. So implied setting is the setting details that come up in like use cases. So a real like common example of this is like a magic item that isn't just a magic wand, but it's like someone's magic wand, right? It's not just ointment, it's Kyogom's ointment, right? It's Melf's magic missile. Who the fuck is Melf? Like that, when I read that stuff, I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. Melf is a guy. He invented this spell, right? He's got an acid arrow, and now he's important, and so you could run into him in the game. I really like that. I actually like that a lot better than here are all the rules, and then here is the setting, and they only intersect in ways when you force them to. I think D&D has a kind of neat implied setting because a tiefling is a tiefling no matter where you go, but in the campaign setting, it says, here's like some additional information about tieflings, right? Here are the demon princes from which they might have come. Implied setting, I think, is really good because it ties your players' choices to things that happen in the campaign setting. So, like, I'm not just a cleric. I'm a cleric of Timora, and Timora is a thing in this world, and I'm going to meet other Timoran clerics. I know if I meet a cleric of Bishaba that we're going to fight. And so it gives you context for your choices because, like, a fighter is nothing, but a purple knight of Cormyr, that's a thing. I can attach to that. I think, like, for example, like in Court of Swords, there has been some of that, like divorcing or altering, and I think that you can sit down with your players at the beginning and say, okay, we are going to be playing Dungeons & Dragons, we're going to be playing 5th edition D&D, but here are the ways in which your choices will be different from what you might expect, right? Like, elves in this setting are from space, I guess, and they're weird parasites. You can't play them, so don't. But giving them that context and changing it, and then also like letting your players make those contextual choices. This is a big thing in Dungeon World, and I kind of let it bleed into my other games, where you can say, okay, so you're a dwarf. What does that mean? Like on a scale of 0 to Gimli, what are you? What is a dwarf in your head like? Then you can use that to build the setting. And I think that's a super fun way to get players invested. But implied setting is, I think, better than handing over a big book of stuff because, again, it'll tie you to the world. So I'm definitely for it. I like it a lot.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Hello.
Hi. I've been running a lot of 5th edition lately. I've got 2 campaigns, and something that comes up is like I have this like Tolkien sort of problem where I'm counting leaves on trees and describing a lot of color. And not getting to the meat of the story.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you're finding yourself like over describing minutia.
Yeah.
You're George R.R. Martining it.
Yeah, and the players are like indulging or enabling me to do this. So like I need to. Something that I want to do is make sure that there is like the story for them to go grab and attack.
Right. So you're feeling like you're playing Dungeons and Dragons and lemon tarts and the cold winter breeze on the soft skin of your face.
Yeah.
Okay. And so why? I mean, this is going to sound trite. Why is this a problem? Like it sounds cool, and it sounds like if your players are enabling you and they're doing it too, you're all just having a great time, like communally writing improvised poetry about a fantasy land. If Tolkien can get away with it, you are allowed too.
True.
But if you don't want to do that anymore, if you'd like to like intersperse a little more action, that's also cool. I can maybe help you with that.
Yeah, I'm looking for that.
Yeah, totally. Like it sounds like it's not necessarily a problem, but you would like to change what's going on. I mean, the biggest question that a GM can ask the players is, "What do you do?" Right? Mm-hmm. So it's like the cool winter breeze caresses your face. What are you gonna do about it? Right? And maybe their answer is like, I floof my hair and look lovingly at my party members. Like you want to encourage action, but like give them things to respond to. You know, it's cool to describe stuff, and like if your style is like a little flowery, that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. But role-playing games are about imagining action. Imagining things happening. Mm-hmm. So when you want to describe something in a like flowery, like detailed way, like that's a gift. That's cool. Like go with that. But describe things that encourage action. Describe things that require response. Right. So when you say to a player, "Here's what you see. Here's what you smell. This is what you feel. What do you do?" Right. What is the next thing? And that you can't answer. What do you do with like descriptions of color, right? They will have to tell you like, oh, I do this thing. And they may describe it in a florid way, and that's cool, but it requires action. So yeah, try to just like practice that. Like practice ending a description with, what do you do? Or like, what do you say? Or like ask them a question. Asking questions is like the most important GMing tool, like period. Like just knowing the right question to ask and knowing when and how to ask it, that's the skill. And you can just start with like, what do you do? That's what I would do. Cool.
Follow up.
Yes, do it.
Asking questions. The question I was trying to figure out how to ask is, right now they're both in sort of like a sandbox. Both the campaigns I'm running
Okay.
are a little sandboxy. I'm letting them be player directed.
Yeah.
And I'm having trouble figuring out how to fill the places they go with things to do. Because right now there's a lot of, we go to this town and they just talk to the NPCs and I can't like pull the quest out and put it in front of them.
Yeah. So for folks who might not be aware already, a sandbox style campaign is not like plot driven. So in a plot driven campaign, it might be, here's the premise. These are things that are going to happen between here and there. It might branch, and then we'll end up at one of multiple kind of like endings. It's a narratively driven plan. A sandbox campaign is essentially, here's the world, you are in it, what do you want to do? Go and explore and find stuff to do. They both have their challenges as models for games, but as you pointed out, like with a sandbox, sometimes it's hard to, like with a plot, if you're like, here's the One Ring, there's Mount Doom, fucking figure it out. But in a sandbox campaign, they have to find Mount Doom, they have to find the ring, they have to figure out why the ring needs to go to Mount Doom. There's a lot more stuff going on. So, yeah, I mean, I think giving the players, like, talking to your players and saying, what do you want to do today? What do you want to do in this campaign? Why does this kind of campaign like work for you? And then thinking about when they go into town, the town isn't there, especially in a sandbox campaign, the town is not there for them. The town's got its own shit going on, and if they wander in, you can put them in like a Yojimbo situation where it's like, hi, welcome to this town. It's super fucked up. So you could get involved in these like warring, I don't know, halfling clans that hate each other, or you could just leave because it's a mess. And so give them hooks, give them opportunities, paint the world like a big mess, and then they're PCs. They're going to meddle, right? They're going to be like, how can we turn this to our advantage? Or how can we make this worse? The town is going to burn down is what will happen. But yeah, imagine, I like to do this with setting stuff. I imagine either a place or a situation, and I think about what is wrong here, where is the tension coming from, and what would happen if the PCs never showed up and screwed with it. So in that case where you're like, you walk into the halfling town and there's these two clans and they're at war, what would happen, and this is just like a list of steps, what would happen if the PCs never showed up? And then the PCs will show up and complicate things, and you can just continue to advance that marker. So if they're like, we're just here to hang out and buy gear and talk to everybody, you could be like, all right, so the first thing on my list is there's a brawl at the local tavern. The PCs witness that or are part of it. If they don't get involved, maybe one of the halfling like clan leaders gets murdered. And that becomes a thing. And the PCs can blithely just go about their business, and you can continue to be like, things are happening in the world, and they'll either get involved or they're going to leave. The thing about a sandbox campaign is you can never really know in game like what they're going to attach to. That's why you ask like about in advance, like either mechanically, like what are your goals? In which case, tie the town to the character in some loose way, or just ask the players like, what do you want to do today? Why are you doing this?
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Hello.
Hello. So I too have been playing role-playing games since I was 10 years old. Played
Nice.
a number of them, but now I'm thinking about becoming a game master. And one of the things that I've noticed through playing is that some of the more fun campaigns have been a ratio of game master 1 to about 12 players.
Oh, damn.
Which over 4 hours is fantastic. I mean, you get all these people together on a ship and you do this thing. After about hour 4, the game master gets completely burnt out and ends up, well, we won't go into that, but doesn't game master for another year. So my question for you is this. I and all of my friends tend to be rather cat herd, cats in a herd type people. And I'm wondering if roping a few of them into helping the game master might not be an option. So for instance, I have NPCs, have a couple people who are actors, who are friends, who come in and help with that. Maybe when there's a downtime because the other 8 people have nothing to do while I'm talking to these 4 people, they go over and they make sure. Have you ever heard of that happening?
Oh, yeah.
Is it successful?
Yeah, totally. So the great advantage of having a big group is that not everybody has to fill a prescribed role all at once, right? Like there are ways in the game to like streamline play. I think the first thing, I mean, you mentioned like you play for 4 hours and then the GM gets tired and doesn't perform as well. 4 hours sounds like the optimal amount of time to play. Like stop, right? When the GM is like, I don't don't want to do this anymore. He says, you're done. Just be done.
But he's an attention hound, so he can't stop. And it
You know,
goes for
you
10.
can't save everyone, and this person needs to handle their shit. So yeah, I mean, like, I think it's okay to be like, listen, Dave, we're past the 4-hour mark. You're getting a little loopy. Maybe we should all go home. But you have this big group, and like, not everybody has to be a PC every session. Not everybody has to be in the spotlight. And using spotlighting techniques and letting the group split up, you know, the common wisdom is you all stick together as like a singular entity and continue to move through the campaign. But you could totally be like, all right, you 4 are going to go off to another land and go on this side quest. So for right now, we're going to focus on this group of 6 people or 8 people or whatever, and they're going to be the thing. But if you want to come to the session, do it. You can play NPCs, you can look up rules, you can hang out, you know, you can be a part of the game in an outside way. And we're going to focus on this, and then later when we go see what you've been up to, there'll be other players who can come in and do that. So you don't have to, like, it doesn't, take a look at, if you can get your hands on a copy, take a look at Ars Magica. So Ars Magica is like basically the ultimate game for this. It's a game set in the like, whatever we're supposed to call the Dark Ages now, the late classical, and you play wizards, but you don't all play wizards at once. So one person will play their wizard in any given session, and everyone else plays their servants and their apprentices and like the underlings that surround them, and they get to be the spotlight wizard and do wizard shit, and then the next episode, the next session, you play something else. And this sort of troop style of shifting play means that everybody gets to kind of attach to different stuff at different times. You'll always get to be your wizard, but maybe tomorrow you'll get to play somebody's apprentice, and then the next session you're somebody else's like manservant. And it's a really fun way to play and to get your fingerprints all over different parts of the world. And I think you can do that in other role-playing games too. It just means that the GM needs to open the book of secrets a little bit and be like, all right, here is, like I was answering the earlier question, you can just say to a player, okay, for today, this is what, you know, Baron Darkwraith wants today. He just wants someone to love him. And here are my 3 notes about Baron Darkwraith. You've seen him a few times in play. I trust you. Here he is. Here is his fragile darkness. And that's really fun because you as a GM can get super inspired by that, where you could be like, I would never have thought to, you know, have him, Baron Darkwraith, sing karaoke to everybody to try to get them to love him. But I guess he's a karaoke guy. I'm into it. So yeah, I think it sounds like you're kind of on the right track. I would definitely check out Ars Magica. And honestly, just like Googling around a little bit for games that support or enable troop style play, that's usually the term that gets used for that kind of thing. I think it will help you find little bits and pieces you can steal.
Super.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hello.
Hello there.
All right, so I'm a new player for about 2 years. I never GM'd it before.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in 2 campaigns with a newest GM and kind of a veteran, but they never have ever played players before.
Okay.
So I was kind of thinking that I would want to put a campaign for them.
Sure.
So they can be players, and because I wanted to GM as well. I want to try that out. But in one campaign, like what you said, it's definitely herding cats. We have one person that completely goes off the script. He has a nice story, and he's the type of GM that he has a plot and a story and an ending in mind, but you're going to have to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't do anything, he's not going to give you any hints about, you know, the main quest or even side quests. You have to go and doing things. So basically, I want to... How would you get people who only GM to be like players and have them, you know, enjoy that experience too, and not have your characters go on tangents?
I think there's this sense of responsibility that builds up if you play as a GM a lot, where you're like, I have to tell an interesting story, and it's really hard. It can be really hard to let go and be like, I'm just going to respond to the stuff that's happening in the world. I mean, with practice, hopefully they'll like work that out. But I think you can just tell them, like, hey, I want a GM. I see you doing this stuff when you're running the game. Mm-hmm. I'd like you to take this opportunity to just like unclench for a minute and let go. Just like let the game happen. It'll be fine. I'm gonna run it now. But keep in mind that like habits build up, right? And people will play the way that they play. It may be that like there's this sort of funny mythology that if you were a player eventually you will like attain enough skill to become a game master. And if you're a game master that you like want to just like let go and be a PC, and that it's like game mastering is hard and playing is fun. But for some people, like being a GM is the way they want to interact with role-playing games. So like if this person is just like having a bad time as a player, it may just not be a thing they want to do, right? Like that's totally fine. They just need to be self-aware enough to recognize that. But I think if you set out to play a certain way and you're like, listen, I want to learn how to play and I want to give you guys an opportunity to play, does that sound fun to you? And if it does, here are some things that I'm concerned about going in, and just hopefully they'll be able to reassure you, or at very least they'll know what is on your mind going in and they'll be able to think about it. And then just like keep checking in, like do a session and be like, how do we feel? This is what I noticed you doing. These are things I like. This is stuff I didn't like. Do you have any advice for me? Like, I love playing for other people who are GMs because I can see them doing things that make my job easier, right? I can see them be like, Adam, wouldn't it be cool if this happened? And I'm like, yes, it would be cool, Mark. Good call. I'll do that. So it can be really nice. But also you got your own space, right? Don't let them run the game through you.
Yeah.
But again, like just, yeah, keep checking in. Just be honest and upfront about like stuff you're nervous about and excited about. And ask them to participate. And then if they're being weird or being jerks, just be like, fucking stop that.
Yeah.
Right? And don't be scared to be like, hey, you're making this awkward for me. Here's
that's
why.
one thing I noticed about like my the new GM. He kind of lets everybody just keep going and going. And I kind of interrupt and go like, all right, guys, shush. Let's keep going with the story.
Yeah, I mean, it's role-playing games are a collaborative experience. And so letting your players help you be a better GM is like very cool and normal.
Yeah, that's good. And follow up, what do you do to that one person that does like to just completely go off everywhere? Just who has a completely no focus, but it's fun?
For me, for the most part, that's JP. And I can't do anything about him because he's in charge. But no, like I think acknowledging it and being like, okay, like I see you trying to motivate the players, and if everybody's okay with putting the harness on this player and following them around, letting them be the leading force, that can be really good because some games can fall into themselves and not have any direction, not have anyone motivating it. But if it's disruptive, if everybody is like side-eyeing each other while this player attempts to light the inn on fire again, you can be like,
we had to kill 2 of his characters previously.
So this is a thing. This is very common advice that I hate. So often it'll be like, we have this player and he always plays characters that do this, and people will give you advice like kill their character or like punish them in universe, right? Like send orcs to get them. It's the worst thing. Never use the game to punish players. Yeah. Say to the player like, hey, I see that you've created another chaotic neutral character. I would like to just talk to you about that choice and how you would like to play it in the game. And if it's just bumming everybody out, it can be a hard conversation to have because nobody wants to be accused of being that player. But like you can say like, listen, you're having fun. We would like also to have fun. Mm-hmm. Let's see if we can find a way that is compatible for everyone.
Yeah, because he's having fun. He doesn't mind if his character gets killed.
Yeah, so it's got to be fun for everybody, and the game usually doesn't help. And so sitting them down and just being like, listen, I see you. I know how you are. We would like you to change.
Yeah.
And it may just be that this person is a bad fit for the group, and that doesn't mean that like they're a fuck up as a person or like you or your group are. Just like sometimes playstyles are incompatible. But I think if you can find a way to encourage this person to continue being a dynamic force of excitement in the game that doesn't derail the game, do it, because those players are valuable too.
Yeah, because he's cool, but
yeah, right. Just like talk to them. Just be like, this is a chaos intervention.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Hey, how's it going?
Hello, it's going great. I'm in the middle of a panel.
Yeah. So I don't know if you're familiar with Star Wars: The Saga Edition.
I have heard of Star Wars.
Kind of like a 3.5. So it has a lot of
I've played
mods and items.
Mm-hmm.
I have one character that really likes to min-max with all of his gear.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of breaks up the story when he's like, hey, I have this new thing that I want to add. And he's like, can I add that now? And it's like, well, we're right in the middle of something. We ended last time you were in the ship, so how were you able to get this item?
Mm-hmm.
I've tried to add like side quests so you can go get these items, but when it turns into like every session there's something new coming up, and it's kind of detracting from the other players' stories. So how do I get that a little bit more in rein?
Yeah, right, because you can end up... So for folks who are not familiar with Star Wars Saga Edition, Wizards of the Coast published a Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition-ish, like, inspired Star Wars game. They had the license for a while, and it was basically like Pathfinder, but for Star Wars. Which, as you can tell, like it leads to, because that system is built on optimization. You want to build a character that's like really good at doing the things that they're good at. There's lots of modifiers, and it's a super fun game if you're into doing like crunchy character building stuff. Very, very different from like the West End game Star Wars or the Fantasy Flight Star Wars. So I think, like on the one hand, choosing to play that version of Star Wars, there's going to be a degree of that, which is fine, and you can handle it. But it sounds like there's one player who that is their big priority.
Yeah, that's their game.
I think you're doing the right thing. Like you can say no without it being like no, shut up, right? It can be like, yeah, that sounds like a great new triple-bladed helicopter lightsaber that you want to build.
Pretty much.
But right, but you don't currently have access to the materials you would need to create this flying death guillotine lightsaber. However, on Planet Guillotine, you can set this up as a thing to be achievable in game, and I think that's absolutely like a great way to do it. Where it's like, yeah, you can have the thing, but you got to work for it, because that puts you in the position to like choose. But that can very easily become the focus of the game. Like, oh, right, great, we're gonna chase Luke's next mod again. Like, that's our game, just running around collecting subclasses. I think you can also say, like, nobody else finds this fun. Can we find a way for your fun and our fun to mesh? But I also think that, like, in a way, and this is where the game is sort of betraying you, that person is playing the game, I don't want to say correctly, but the game is very encouraging of that kind of optimization. So it's much harder, because that person can just point at the game and be like, but look, they want me to be super OP, right? It's Luke and Leia and Han and Killfuck Soul Shitter, the cyborg Jedi Wookiee, like...
Fortunately, it's Scum and Villainy, so it's no Jedi.
Good.
Like,
okay.
Overpowered.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, like make it in-game stuff. Try to make it like give them like one for every arc. Like if you have a block of 12 sessions, make 1 or 2 of those sessions like focused on the thing, but also give everybody else the same chance to like set up the quest. And so this kind of goes back to the spotlighting thing, where you can be like, all right, Killfuck, it's your turn to lead the group. Let's go to Planet Min-Max, and we can do your thing. And then your bit is done. You can now play with your new toy while everybody else gets to do their stuff.
So kind of have different people lead.
Yeah, right? Like if you're going to give the player who is playing this game that way, if you're going to give them a spotlight, give the spotlight to the other players too, and like let them get excited about stuff, whether it's mechanical or narrative, right?
Okay.
And so sharing that within the greater arc of the game gives everybody a chance to be like, yeah, this is my episode. I get to do the cool thing. And then when they make their choice, it might be about a mechanical thing, or it might not.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hello.
Hello there.
So my group is oftentimes like the group that you read about in all the memes, where it's like, great session, see you in 3 months.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And that's fine. Like that fits our schedule, and we enjoy playing that way. But most of our players sort of set up their character to be someone that had a lot of personality, and since we have so much time in between sessions, the next time they show up, they sort of start to lose that personality.
Right, they come to the table and like, weren't you Danish last time?
Right, yeah.
You sound like you're from Spain now.
The one person in our group who is usually always the goofball, they made their character to be very stoic and serious so they could play that role because they really wanted to do it. But now when we show up, it's sort of everyone just defaults to their own personality, and so now that character is the one cracking all the jokes. Mm-hmm. So other than sort of writing down every single thing that happens so that you remember it next time, do you have any other advice for both players and GMs in terms of remembering not just what your character did, but also how they are?
So playing once every like 2 or 3 months is really counter to like building a campaign, because I find you do kind of need that like regular contact with a character. If you go 6 weeks without playing a character, they can kind of get fuzzy, especially if you're GMing and you've got all this like character stuff to juggle in your head. So it can degrade. And if you don't have like a clear record like we do with like YouTube videos of stuff, it's really easy to forget what your character wanted or what they were doing. So I would say play the campaign that fits the schedule rather than trying to make the schedule like adapt to the type of game you're playing. So like try to play episodically, make the characters only really matter during the session that they're in, and then either make new characters in the same world or let them change to another character if they want to. I think really like character adherence only happens if you really want it to. So like the players will have to make notes and have to pay attention and like really like remember this stuff themselves. So you can free them from that and be like, all right, the point of the campaign is that it's set in this world, and today we're going to play a 6-hour session set in the world, and you're all doing this thing in this place. And by the end of it, we're going to come to some kind of conclusion. And then next time, we'll explore a different part of the world. Or like anybody who wants to play the same character who still has a good handle on that character, cool. You be the same guy you were last time, but everybody else, you can make new characters. And so it ends up being like a pulp novel series, right? Like Conan is Conan in everything he's in, but he's always traveling with like different friends and like going to different places because there's no need to drill that narrative together. It can be serial like that. And I think you can do that. It's hard when the game's explicitly kind of from level 1 to level 20. Like if you're playing D&D, progression of the same character is the inbuilt thing. But you can, if you want, just set like goal posts. Be like, this is the level 1 episode. Everybody's level 1. Next episode, everybody can be level 3. Doesn't matter if you make a new character, you play the same one. So there's lots of ways to kind of like bend that. But yeah, I would change the format of the campaign to support the style of play, which is to say episodic, rather than try to force something that's going to be really hard over 3-month gaps.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So I have a very sweet problem.
Okay.
I play Fantasy Flight's Star Wars game. And in my group, I have 4 players, and 2 of them are overly nice.
Okay, I wish I knew what that was like.
So a prime example of this is the Destiny pool.
Mm-hmm.
My players, well, these 2 players will interrupt the flow to ask everyone in the group if it's okay to flip that Destiny point for their action. And kind of just the flow of the story, the flow of the gameplay seems to get bottlenecked when they want to make a decision.
Oh, so they like get into a Canadian standoff where they're like, you use it, no, you use it.
Yeah,
no, you
exactly.
go ahead.
Like,
no, you go, just you do
any
it.
like decision or action point that they have to make gets bottlenecked because they want to make sure that it tallies up with what everyone else wants the story to go. And it's like, how do I get these players to think in their characters' minds and do that?
Sure.
Because that will make like the whole story.
I think you can. So it sounds like you're just having the same processes over and over and over, right? Where you're like, they're not sure. They don't want anyone to think that they're being selfish by using the Destiny pool. So the Destiny pool is like a shared resource that everybody gets access to that can give you bonuses to your role. And anybody can just be like, I'm going to use one of my points, and that gives the GM an advantage. It flips the point to the dark side. So they don't want to be seen as being like giving you an advantage that everyone else is going to resent, or like imagine if inspiration was just a pool and you were like every time it was your action you're like I'm going to use it, I'm using it all up, and then the GM's like cool, you run out and I kill all of you. They don't want to be responsible for that. And also there's that whole thing of like it's a shared resource, so you want to check in, and that's I think it's a good impulse, but there's no need to have that check in every single time, right? So you can sit down before the next session and say, okay, regarding the Destiny pool, what circumstances is it okay for everyone to just do the thing, right? To just be like, I need this for my role. What circumstances do we think it's not okay? Are there any times where we would definitely have to check in? Do we only check in on the last point? Do we is there a step for, you can flip it over so if anybody has a problem, they can be like, hold on, no, right? Veto power, because then it takes it off of the person asking. They can just be like, I'm going to do it. Okay, I do it, right? And if nobody says no, they can go ahead. You don't want to get bogged down in the bureaucracy of it, right? You don't want it to be like, I would like to use this point. Here is my 6-paragraph document suggesting why I should use this point. Can we all vote? You don't need to have a parliamentary discussion about it. And I think that you can establish a situation in which they have permission to be a little more aggressive if you do it before and outside the moment. If you say, let's talk about the use of the Destiny pool and like how everybody feels about that. Because I bet the rest of your players are probably okay with them just being like, I'm using this point now. right? Like they want that too. So yeah, sit them down, acknowledge with them that it's okay. If they want to have like a thing that makes them feel better about using it, I would suggest trying for like a veto system instead. So say like, you can use the point as long as nobody else says no. And if somebody says no, they have to make a case for why you shouldn't use it, and then we can discuss it, because sometimes it is like a significant tactical decision, right? Yeah. Sometimes giving you that one more dark side point means the team is potentially doomed. So it is valid as a question, but you don't want it to come up every time. So just have that discussion once at the beginning, and then let them go.
How do you kind of tackle for just like story beats? So like a character goes one direction, but before they go in that direction, they're like asking everyone if that's where they should go. So like, do we want to go this way, or should we do this?
Same conversation, right? Like they're just asking about taking control and giving them permission in advance to do that, and under what circumstances that would be okay is a really helpful thing, because then it doesn't come up every single time. Cool. Thank you. I know that we have one more, and I'm gonna get you outside because we have run out of time. Thank you for coming, everybody. This has been Office Hours Live. I'm Adam Coble. I do this show on Twitch every week, give or take, on twitch.tv/Adam Coble. So check it out if you haven't already, and go and enjoy the rest of your con. Short though it may be. Bye, y'all.